You do not wake inside a legend. You wake inside a city that has only hours left and does not know it yet. Pompeii is already alive around you. A mule stamps in its stall. A woman below is grinding grain. Someone coughs through a thin wall. The street smells of wet plaster, lamp smoke, stale wine, and the sour drains running beneath too many feet. Nothing about this morning feels grand. It feels cramped, sweaty, ordinary. That is what would make the end so hard to recognize. When Vesuvius finally comes for Pompeii, it does not interrupt a famous tragedy. It interrupts a normal day that still expects tomorrow. If you are poor, the day starts before comfort has a chance to exist. If you are rich, someone else is already awake protecting you from inconvenience. Bakers knead dough, shopkeepers unlatch shutters. The forum will fill, the baths will steam, the taverns will pour before noon, and painted villas will keep pretending the world is orderly. There is no warning cry hanging over the city, no line in the sky telling you to run. The mountain sits where it always sits, broad and familiar, a shape people have learned to live beside by forgetting what it can do. That familiarity is part of the trap. You are already used to tremors. Everyone is. The ground in this region has a habit of reminding people that it is alive, and when something happens often enough, fear wears down into annoyance. A cup rattles, a shelf shakes, dust slips from a beam. Someone curses and keeps eating. Someone laughs and says the gods are in a mood again. Months of these little warnings teach the city the worst possible lesson, that what has not destroyed you yet probably never will. So when the first stronger vibration moves through the street under your sandals, you do not run. You pause, you steady yourself, you wait for it to pass. Then the mountain changes shape. You look up because other people are looking up. Heads tilt, hands shield eyes. Conversations stop in pieces, not all at once. Above Vesuvius, a rising column begins to climb into the sky. Too tall, too fast, too strange to belong to weather. It is not like a storm cloud rolling in from far away. It is a thing being built in front of you, moment by moment. A dark trunk lifting upward, and then spreading at the top like some monstrous pine tree rooted in the crater. Even before you understand what you are seeing, the city does. Noise falters. The first true silence of the day appears. That silence does not last. Pompeii is a city of arguments, prices, rumors, orders, prayers, and gossip, and now all of it erupts at once. Some people shout for family, some run home, some rush toward the forum, because crowds attract crowds and bad decisions are easier to make in public. The wealthy send slaves to fetch valuables, documents, jewelry, cash boxes. The poor think first of bread, water, children, and whether a doorway will still be standing by evening. In one part of town, a household begins packing silver. In another, someone is deciding which child can be carried and which must keep up on foot. Disaster reveals rank quickly, so does escape. The first stones do not feel like stones from a mountain. They feel impossible. Light pieces of pumice begin falling from the sky, tapping roofs, courtyards, awnings, and shoulders with a sound that is almost harmless at first, like thrown handfuls of chalk. People hold out their hands in disbelief. The pieces are pale, rough, strangely weightless for something falling from that height. A few moments later, there are more of them. Then more. Then so many that disbelief becomes urgency. The sound on tile changes from tapping to drumming. Streets begin to whiten. Sandals scrape over fresh grit that did not exist a minute earlier. If you stand outside too long, the city starts disappearing from the top down. Roof lines blur. Statues and niches fade. Frescoes lose color under dust. Sunlight turns mean and filtered, as if the day itself is being strained through dirty cloth. The air grows sharp in your throat. You taste bitterness on your tongue. Every breath feels half borrowed. Somewhere nearby, a donkey screams and refuses to move. Somewhere else, a man insists this will pass and bars his door, convinced thick walls are stronger than open roads. That is the second trick of catastrophe. Every choice feels reasonable for one more minute than it should. Inside a small room, you try to think. That is harder than it sounds. Ash is already slipping through openings. settling on bedding, tables, and the oil on your skin. The lamp flame flickers in a draft that did not exist before. Outside, the street is louder now, but not in the normal way. It is panic without rhythm, running feet, crashing pottery, a child crying until the sound breaks, someone pounding on a neighbor's door. You gather what matters by instinct, not logic. A cloak, a water container, a purse if you have one, bread if there is any left. In the end, survival turns every home into a test of what can be abandoned without stopping. When you step back outside, the city already feels older, as if years of decay have fallen in an hour. White fragments bounce around your ankles. Roof edges spit dust. The painted election notices on the walls are still visible, but they suddenly look ridiculous, promises from a morning that belongs to another civilization. You see men using cushions, baskets, and pieces of wood as shields over their heads. You see women with their clothing wrapped around their mouths. You see servants loaded with goods that will become useless if they cannot breathe long enough to carry them. Wealth still tries to look organized. Fear makes everyone look equal eventually. The streets of Pompeii are not made for orderly escape. They are made for traffic, trade, and everyday noise, not for an entire city deciding at the same time that it must leave. Wagons jam the intersections. Animals balk. People push toward gates already crowded with bodies, bundles, and confusion. Stepping stones across the roads, useful on ordinary days when filth collects in the gutters, become obstacles now. You stumble on them because the ground is slick with ash. Wheels grind and stick. Voices disappear into the constant rattle from above. The city, so practical yesterday, suddenly feels like a trap designed by people who believed tomorrow was guaranteed. And still, some stay. You would see them framed in doorways, peering into the bright fall of pumice as if judgment might improve with one more look. An old man, unwilling to leave the household gods. A shop owner who cannot bear to abandon a lifetime's inventory. A mother waiting for one person who said he would be right back. A wealthy family retreating deeper into a grand house because the walls are thick, the courtyard is familiar, and leaving means joining the desperate outside. Pompeii does not divide neatly between the brave and the foolish. It divides between those who move in time and those who mistake familiarity for safety. Hours pass in a shrinking world. That may be the cruelest part to witness. Disaster is not always one violent moment. Sometimes it is accumulation. The stones keep falling. Roofs begin carrying loads they were never meant to hold. Courtyards fill. Drainage cannot keep up. Every surface that once reflected status now collects the same pale ruin. Fine mosaic floors, market stalls, sacred steps, sleeping corners, bakery counters, garden statues, all buried grain by grain. If you glance toward the villas of the wealthy, you do not see luxury anymore. You see larger roofs, larger courtyards, larger chances for collapse. The sky darkens long before evening. Not dramatically at first, but steadily until daylight feels sick. Then comes the deeper darkness, the kind that confuses your sense of direction even in streets you have known your whole life. Lamps appear in shaking hands. Torches flare and die in the dirty air. Shadows leap across walls painted with bright gods who now look powerless in soot-stained light. You hear prayers to Jupiter, to Isis, to any name that might still carry authority. Religion becomes less ceremonial in moments like this. It becomes bargaining. It becomes breath shaped into hope. If you try for the gates, you find something worse than crowding. Hesitation. Everyone wants to leave, but not everyone knows where safety is. The roads beyond the city are uncertain under falling debris. The countryside is exposed. The sea looks possible to some, but the shoreline is chaos. Families lose each other 3 times in 10 steps. People call names until those names turn into sounds without meaning. A father doubles back for a child he thought was behind him. A slave is told to carry a chest and realizes the chest matters less with every labored breath. Someone drops coins into ash and does not stop to recover them. Near the harbor, the scene is no cleaner. Boats promise escape only from a distance. Up close there is surf, confusion, shouting, and a horizon blotted by strange weather. Ash reaches the water. The light over the bay turns unnatural, copper and gray, beautiful in the way dangerous things often are when viewed from far enough away. Here, close to it, beauty has no value. People stumble over nets, ropes, baskets, and each other. Those with influence try to command space. Those without it try to slip through gaps. The sea is not calm salvation. It is just another uncertain road crowded with human desperation. Back in the city, roofs start giving way one district at a time, not every house at once. That would almost be merciful in its clarity. Instead, collapse arrives in scattered shocks that travel by sound before sight. A heavy crack overhead, a cry, a burst of dust, then another somewhere else. You learn to look up and hate yourself for it, because looking up means seeing how much weight is gathering over every room that still feels like shelter. Indoors is safer from falling stone until the ceiling decides otherwise. Outdoors is clearer until the sky itself becomes the danger. Every option is a bargain with forces too large to notice you. By now the ash is in everything. It grits between your teeth. It cakes in the folds of clothing. It turns tears into muddy streaks on faces. It settles in hair, eyebrows, and lashes until people look like statues of themselves. Breathing becomes labor, not instinct. Every sentence shortens. Every decision slows. You begin to understand that survival is being stolen not in one dramatic strike, but in handfuls of exhaustion. This is how cities die for the people inside them. Not only through heat and force, but through confusion, weight, thirst, darkness, and the gradual failure of the body to keep negotiating with the air. And beneath all of it sits the old social order, cracking but not gone. In a richer house, someone may still have a storeroom, extra water, servants to fetch news, stronger doors, and a courtyard large enough to delay panic. In a cramped apartment above a shop, there is no delay. There is only closeness, noise, and the immediate question of whether the stairs will hold. The disaster does not erase inequality. It translates it. Better walls buy time. More hands buy options. Money can purchase animals, transport, favors, and room to move. But there comes a point when even privilege is reduced to the same raw bargain. Can you get your lungs and your loved ones out before the city seals? At some point, the mountain stops seeming distant. You no longer think of Vesuvius as scenery. You feel it as presence. The ground shivers underfoot with a force that turns knees unreliable. There are flashes somewhere within the cloud mass, or perhaps you imagine them because fear fills gaps with its own light. Thunder-like sounds roll through the dark, but they are thicker than thunder, heavier, as if the sky itself is collapsing in sections. People around you begin speaking in the flat, stunned voices of those who have crossed from panic into disbelief. The city that fed, entertained, taxed, housed, punished, and distracted them is becoming unrecognizable while they are still inside it. If you seek refuge in a public building, you would not be alone. Arches and stone walls draw people the way caves draw animals in a storm. Strangers press shoulder to shoulder. Class markers blur under dust, though habits remain. Some still expect to be obeyed. Some still lower their gaze. Some clutch amulets. Some clutch ledgers. Some clutch children who have gone strangely quiet. Every few moments, someone suggests a different plan with the confidence of a man who has no real control. Wait here. Run now. Head for the water. Stay off the main road. The room fills with the worst kind of hope, the kind attached to guesses. Then comes the deeper horror, not because it is the most graphic, but because it feels final. The air changes. Even before you know why, your body notices. There is a new heat in the wind, a pressure that does not belong to ordinary weather, and a sudden urgency in everyone who can still move. The darkness outside is no longer just falling ash. It has mass. It feels like something advancing. Birds vanish from the soundscape. Dogs stop barking. For a brief instant, the city holds a silence so complete it feels unnatural, as if Pompeii itself has inhaled and cannot decide whether it will ever exhale again. What you would see then is not heroism in the polished, statuesque sense. You would see people stripped down to essence. A man using his own body to cover someone smaller. A woman refusing to let go of a hand even when the crowd pulls them apart by force. Someone dropping a bag of valuables because it has become ridiculous to carry metal when breath is worth more. Someone else still clutching that metal because the mind cannot abandon a lifetime of caution all at once. This is not the clean morality of stories. It is the crowded, painful truth of human beings trying to choose in conditions that crush choice itself. The city's colors are nearly gone now. Red walls, black floors, green gardens, bright fruit, bronze fittings, blue sea, all swallowed into a palette of dust, ember, and weak torchlight. Even sound begins to behave differently. It is muffled, swallowed, then suddenly sharpened by echoes off stone. Somewhere a statue falls. Somewhere an animal kicks itself free from a tether and runs blind. Somewhere people who mocked the first warning are now praying aloud without shame. Memory itself starts breaking apart because there is too much to process. Streets lose their names. Landmarks lose their shape. The city becomes a maze built from things you used to recognize. You would also see how quickly civilization becomes physical. The elegant Roman world, the one of mosaics, legal power, polished speeches, baths, imported wine, and carefully staged status, is reduced to lungs, feet, shoulders, and direction. Can you carry someone? Can you climb over debris? Can you cover your mouth? Can you keep moving when the ground shakes? Can you choose a path without certainty? In the end, empire does not save a person from falling ash. Literacy does not hold up a roof beam. Reputation does not clear the road. The body becomes the final measure, and even the strongest body can only bargain for so long. If you are still outside when the hottest waves begin reaching the edges of the city, you do not need to understand the science to know the world has turned against life. The air arrives wrong, too hot, too fast, too full of choking force. It feels less like wind than a furnace door opened nearby. People instinctively lower themselves, hide behind walls, turn faces away, cover mouths, press into stone, into each other, into any scrap of shelter. There is no noble speech here, no final perfect sentence. There is only the terrible speed at which certainty ends and instinct spends itself. And after that, what you would see becomes hard to separate from what you would fail to see. Streets vanish, courtyards vanish, doorways vanish, light vanishes, the market, the temples, the painted rooms, the workshop benches, the amphitheater laughter, the tavern noise, the petty arguments, the marriage plans, the debt, the ambition, the perfume, the sewage, the bread ovens, the little jokes people told each other every week. All of it is overwhelmed by the same descending silence. Not erased from history, not quite, but removed from the living city in one long, punishing act of burial. That is what makes Pompeii so unsettling to imagine. It was not a legend while it was happening. It was a normal place full of ordinary timing. Someone had meant to repair a wall. Someone had planned dinner. Someone had expected payment. Someone had promised to come back before dark. Then the mountain interrupted every unfinished sentence at once. If you live through those final hours, what you would see is not only the destruction of a Roman city. You would see how thin daily certainty always was, how fragile comfort becomes under pressure, and how quickly the familiar world can turn into a place that no longer recognizes the people still trying to survive inside it.